Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Is anti-Semitism the same as anti-Zionism? This is something which the Zionists would like you to believe that it is the same, but is it? That's the subject that we're going to explore today. Judaism is a 4,000-year-old respectable religion. Zionism is a politically motivated, white nationalist, settler, colonial movement which is just a few hundred years old. It was created in Europe to allow a group of troubled people to go and settle in a distant land. Today, I'm here to clear some of those myths, but for that I need some of your help. Because every time I point the mic at you, I want you to say one word, all loud and proud together. Zionism, okay? Let's try this out. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Zionists claim that they have a biblical right to the land of Palestine. Orthodox Jews like the Neturei Karta oppose Zionism because they feel that the Jews must not have a land of their own till the Messiah arrives, especially not through oppression and suppression of the people over there. Aren't they interpreting the same Torah and the Bible? Is that anti-Semitism or is that anti-Zionism? 1903, the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, wanted the land of Palestine but was ready to settle for a land in Kenya instead. If the land promised by God to you was so sacred, why were you willing to settle for another one? Is that reminder on history anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Genetic studies were performed to prove that the European Jews who had migrated to Israel were from that local area of Middle East. Dr. Oppenheim of Hebrew University and later Dr. Elhack of Johns Hopkins in independent studies virtually found that all the Jewish immigrants had Khazar blood. Not Jewish and Middle Eastern blood, but Khazar blood. And worse, they found that some of the local Palestinians, in fact, had Jewish blood. And how could that be? That's because theirs were the initial Jews who never migrated, stayed back, converted to Islam. And is that discussion anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Many anti-Semites support Zionism because they wanted to remove Jews from Europe. Theodor Herzl, their forefather, wrote, quote, "The anti-Semites will become our most loyal friends." He was right for sure. The famous Arthur Balfour, the guy who gave them the land, the Balfour Declaration, had said that he called the European Jews a misery for the West as they were alien and hostile. He also said men are not born equal. White and black races are born with different capacities. Is this discussion about anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? They call anybody who opposes Israel an anti-Semite. But there's one problem. There's a growing number of Jews who oppose Israel and its racist policies. What about a Noam Chomsky, an Ilan Pape, a Miko Peled, a Medea Benjamin, to name a few? In 2018, 35 Israeli laureates and prize winners had gotten together an open letter in which they wrote, many victims of the Holocaust opposed Zionism, while many anti-Semites supported Zionism. It's nonsensical to identify anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Is that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? If you want to learn about the first terrorists of the Middle East, just Google Israeli militia and terrorism. Just do that, okay? And you can even narrow the search down to Israeli newspapers like the Herald. You will find names like Irgun and Haganah pop up. You will learn how they were responsible for the Deir Yassin massacre, the King David Hotel bombing, the Semiramis Hotel bombing, and the cold-blooded murder of a Swedish diplomat and negotiator, Folk Bernadotte. Does that sound like anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? 1948, the Nakba. 800,000 Palestinians were either killed or displaced. 531 of the 1,000 villages were destroyed. It was an ethnic cleansing and exposure of the Palestinians just because there'll be a Jewish majority. 5.6 million Palestinians are still registered by UNRWA as refugees, and they're not allowed back home. If the entire premise of Israel is that they want to return back to their homeland, and the homeland from 2,000 years ago. Then why aren't you allowing these Palestinians when you kicked them out in 1948? Is that hypocrisy? Is that anti-Semitism or anti? Say I'm a Native American, okay? You live in Bronx, I come and knock on your door and say in the middle of the night that you have to get out of there. Why? Because somewhere in this area my forefathers lived. And that's a house that your great-great-great-grandfather built, and you have been living there for generations. And you say, what can you prove? How do you prove that? You say that the proof is my interpretation of my religious book. But if you don't listen, the NYPD will come and throw you out of here, demolish the house, and by the way, you have to pay for the demolition. Is that ridiculous but real example anti-Semitism or anti? Israel is the only democracy, like that poster says, in the Middle East. We hear that all the time. Let's examine that a little bit. Israel's first Prime Minister Ben-Gurion said, if we want Hebrew redemption, we must have 100% Hebrew settlement, Hebrew farm, Hebrew port. He called the Jewish immigrant in North Africa a savage. He called the Jewish laborers should earn higher salary as they were more intelligent than the Arabs. Does that sound like the founder of a democracy? And is that anti-Semitism or anti? Let us examine some of the laws of this great democracy. The 1950s law of return. Say you're born in New York, but you have never set foot in Israel, but you want to go and settle there. You can. Not only you can do that, but you'll get a free ticket. Once you land there, the 1952 citizenship law will give you that citizenship. You can pass it on to your spouse. And if you are a non-Jewish person over there, forget about it. Is that anti-Semitism or anti? The 1950s absentees property law doesn't allow you to own property if you have left the place for 8 years. But if you are Jewish, surprise, surprise, this does not apply. Israel took away hundreds and thousands of acres of land because those Palestinians were absent. They were absent because you threw them out and you're not letting them back in. Ethnic engineering to ensure Israeli dominance, they built around Palestinian communities, choking off all chances of expansion. 21% of the Israeli citizens are Arabs, but you know how much land they own? 3%. Is this discussion anti-Semitism or anti? 2018 nation-state law is the best one of them all. Democracy by left foot. It says that Israel is a state of the Jewish people, and the right of self-determination is unique to the Jewish people. It promotes illegal settlements. As Netanyahu himself said, Israel isn't a state of all its citizens, but a nation-state of the Jewish people and only them. To say it's not a democracy is not anti-Semitism, it is. Amnesty International in its 2015 report documented unlawful killings of 15,000 Palestinians, including 2,000 children. Hear that? Ukrainian humanitarians? Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem described the methods to torture. Human Rights Watch in its 2021 report, A Threshold Cross, made detailed documentation of how Israel met the definition of an apartheid nation. After all this proof we discovered, even that Zionists cannot call Israel a democracy, and that is really Is there any anti-Semitism around in this world? You bet. It's been there for decades. Like myself, I'm sure all of you who are gathered here find anti-Semitism reprehensible, vile, and condemn the destruction of synagogues and other religious places. The propaganda is that the anti-Zionists like ourselves or movements like the BDS are responsible for it. However, most of these attacks are by the white nationalists. Their leader, Richard Spencer, himself called himself a white Zionist who saw Israel as a role model for the white homeland that he wants to create in the United States. Remember Charlottesville? Jews will not replace us. And is Israel's favorite president saying very fine people on both sides? That is anti-Semitism, and discussing that is anti. They say Jews should have a nation. There are many ethnic groups who don't have a state, like the Uyghurs, the Rohingyas, the Kurds, the Druze, Kashmiris, Tamils, Scots. Forget all that. How about the Native Americans right here? That isn't anti-Semitism, that is anti-Zionism. What are some arguments against Palestine? They say there isn't a letter P in Arabic, so there couldn't be a Palestine. True, Arabs can't even say the letter P properly. They say Coke and Pepsi, for God's sake. Habibi, Arabs didn't call it Palestine, they call it Palestine. However, a friendly reminder to my Jewish friends, there's no J in Hebrew. Is this cheesy, unacademic discussion anti-Semitism, or is it anti? In conclusion, what is the solution? Another peace accord like Oslo, which is Israel will keep breaking again and again with its continued expansion and settlements. Avi Shlaim, a renowned historian and Oxford professor, talked about these peace accords between the two. It's like negotiating over the pizza when one party keeps on eating that pizza. Two-state solution has been dead for a while. This conflict has stumped all the famous negotiators, including the most famous one of them all, who read 25 books on this topic, Jared Kushner. Imagine that. There is only one solution, and that is one state with equal rights for all. We won't accept Palestinian nor Jewish children being killed. We want peace, we want justice, we want freedom. However, we will not be scared by making our movement as anti-Semitism. You hope we will quietly disappear into the night. We'll be right here until that oppressed nation is free. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Thanks. Thank you very much.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Thank you so much, Dr. Mousvi. Our next speaker is Kausar Abdullah. Kausar, are you here? She is a volunteer for the Yemeni Alliance Committee of New York. She's actually a Yemeni American herself. We are so happy to have her here.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So the Yemeni Alliance Committee stand in